HOA Karen reported my house for unsafe construction. She didn't know I was a city inspector. The day I closed on the house, I wasn't just buying a property. I was unwittingly enlisting in a war I didn't even know existed. The house was perfect. A neglected 1970s craftsman-style home in the quiet suburb of Maple Creek Estates, a place of meticulously manicured lawns and an almost unnerving silence. To me, it was a blank canvas. I'm Mark Turner, and by day I'm a senior building inspector for the city. My life is codes, regulations, and structural safety. I live by the book. I understand it, I respect it, and I enforce it. Ironically, my job was the reason I bought this house. After years of scrutinizing other people's work, I craved a project of my own. Specifically, I wanted to build a deck. Not just any deck, but a masterpiece of backyard engineering. I spent 6 months planning it. I drew the blueprints myself, ran the load calculations, and specified the finest materials. I submitted my plans to my own department and received full stamped approval with all the necessary permits. I'd taken 3 weeks of vacation time to dedicate to this build. I was doing everything by the book. What I hadn't anticipated was the Maple Creek Estates book. The day I moved in, as the moving truck was pulling away, a woman marched across the street. She had the angular blonde bob, an absurdly expensive-looking peach Lululemon jogging suit, and a tray of blueberry muffins. She looked like the physical embodiment of the perfect suburban housewife. "Welcome to the neighborhood," she chirped, her voice high and cloyingly sweet. "I'm Carol Peterson. I'm the president of our HOA board." I wiped the sweat from my forehead and shook her hand. "Mark Turner. Nice to meet you. Thanks for the muffins." Carol smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. Her eyes were scanning my property, taking notes, cataloging. "Oh, it's just wonderful to have another handy man in the neighborhood," she said, the word handy sounding like a mild insult. "Just so you're aware, we do have some community guidelines to keep Maple Creek beautiful." I took the liberty of bringing you a copy. She handed me a 3-inch thick binder. It weighed as much as a brick. "It's mostly common sense things," she said breezily. Approved paint colors, fence heights, no boats or RVs in the driveway for more than 24 hours. We find that rules make for good neighbors. Her gaze landed on the pile of high-grade lumber I had stacked neatly by the side of the house. "Planning a little project, are we?" "Just a backyard deck, ma'am," I said, trying to keep it friendly. "Got my city permits and everything." Carol's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly. "Oh, that's sweet. But you did submit your plans to the HOA's Architectural Review Committee, didn't you? As per Article 4, Subsection C, any external modifications must be approved by the committee before work begins. City permits don't really have any bearing on our covenants." I blinked. I'd skimmed the covenants, but I'd assumed a backyard build not visible from the street would be exempt. "I'll look into it," I said. "I'm sure we can get it sorted out." Carol smiled, a thin, tight smile that didn't touch her cold eyes. "Wonderful. We just wouldn't want any unsafe construction bringing down our property values. It would be just awful if someone got hurt." She turned and strode away, her peach-colored perfection feeling like a threat. I stared at the HOA binder. The sinking feeling in my stomach told me my deck was going to be the least of my problems. The war began not with a bang, but with a series of beige-colored envelopes. The first one arrived 3 days into my project. I'd spent those 3 days doing the most back-breaking, tedious work, digging and pouring the footings. This was the foundation, the most critical part, and I was taking no shortcuts. I was using 18-inch diameter concrete forms, sunk 48 inches deep into the dense clay soil, far exceeding the 12-inch, 36-inch depth required by city code. I wanted this deck to outlast the house itself. I was covered in sweat and concrete slurry, mixing my 10th 80-pound bag in the wheelbarrow, when I felt it. The unmistakable sensation of being watched. I glanced up. There she was. Carol. She was walking her miniature poodle on the sidewalk, but she was stopped, staring intently into my backyard from across the street. Her phone was held up just discreetly enough that she could claim to be checking an email, but the angle of the camera was aimed right at me. I gave a short, tired wave. She flinched, startled at being caught, forced a strained smile, and then hurried on, practically dragging the tiny dog behind her. An hour later, the first letter was in my mailbox. It was printed on the HOA's signature heavy cardstock, a pale, nauseating beige with a severe serif font. Violation warning, Article 6, Subsection A, Construction Hours. It has come to our attention, it read, that all noise-producing construction activities including, but not limited to, hammering, sawing, and the use of electric mixers, must cease promptly at 5 p.m. on weekdays. A neighbor reported the sound of a concrete mixer at 5:17 p.m. Please ensure all future activities adhere to the community guidelines. I looked at my watch. It was 5:30. I had been in the middle of a pour. I couldn't just stop, but she was technically correct. I sighed, the grit of the concrete dust mixing with my frustration. Fine, I could play by those rules. I was a rules follower after all. The next day I was meticulous. I started at 8 a.m. on the dot. I watched the clock like a hawk, and at exactly 4:45 p.m. I began cleaning my tools. At 4:59 p.m. I shut the wheelbarrow in the garage. Silence. I went inside, poured a glass of water, and felt a small, petty victory. It was short-lived. The thwack of the mail slot echoed through the quiet house. I walked over and picked up the second beige envelope of the week. Violation warning, Article 9, Subsection F, Property Upkeep and Aesthetics. A pile of dirt and construction debris, including empty concrete bags and wood scraps, was observed on your driveway. Per community standards, all building materials and refuse must be stored out of public sight or removed by the end of each workday to maintain the aesthetic integrity of the neighborhood. They were talking about the dirt I'd excavated for the footings, which was piled neatly on a tarp next to my garage, and the stack of empty quick-read bags I had planned to take to the dump that weekend. I was in violation. Again, my jaw clenched. This was my vacation. This was my time. And now I was going to have to spend an hour in the dark moving a 2-ton pile of dirt. I grabbed the wheelbarrow and a shovel. Under the harsh glare of my porch light, I spent the next 90 minutes hauling load after load of dense clay into my backyard, hiding it behind a row of bushes. I was exhausted, angry, and my back was screaming, but I did it. I was in compliance. On day 3, I started the framing. This was my favorite part, where the structure finally takes shape. This was my expertise. I was using 2x12 pressure-treated lumber for the main beams and 2x10 joists, spaced 12 inches on center. City code allowed for 16 inches. Again, I was building it like a public boardwalk, not a residential deck. It was solid. It was safe. It was, in my professional opinion, beautiful. And that's when Carol decided to pay a personal visit. She appeared at the edge of my backyard, muffinless this time, her arms crossed. "Hi, Mark," she said, her voice dripping with that familiar faux concern. "That looks large." "It's exactly to the specs I filed with the city," I said, not bothering to stop my drill. "And with your HOA committee, which I have yet to hear back from." "Oh yes, about that," she said, waving her hand dismissively as if it were a trivial piece of paperwork. "The committee is just so behind." But I couldn't help but notice. "You're using so much wood. It just seems a bit excessive. Are you sure that's safe?" I slowly put my drill down. The patience I had cultivated over a decade of dealing with difficult contractors and hysterical homeowners finally snapped. I, the senior building inspector for the entire city, was being questioned on structural integrity by a woman whose only visible skill was organizing bake sales and color-coordinating jogging suits. "Ms. Peterson," I said, my voice dangerously calm, "what you call excessive is called structural engineering. The beams are 2x12s, the joists are 2x10s at 12-inch spacing. It's designed to hold a live load of 80 pounds per square foot, which is more than double the code requirement. This deck isn't just safe, it's a bunker. It is, without question, the most structurally sound thing in this entire neighborhood." She blinked, clearly not understanding a single technical word I'd said. All she heard was my tone. Her lips pursed into a thin white line. "Well, it just looks heavy to me. I'd hate for it to collapse and hurt someone. We'll just have to see about that." She turned on her heel and marched away. That was a threat. The letter that day was a doozy. It wasn't a warning. It was an escalation. Official notice. Denial of architectural application. My heart hammered against my ribs. "The Architectural Review Committee has met," it read, "and your application has been denied." Denied? On what grounds? I read on. "The proposed structure is deemed out of harmony with the natural environment and existing architecture of Maple Creek Estates." That was subjective nonsense. But the next line was the real dagger. "Furthermore, due to significant concerns raised by other residents about the size, scale, and excessive materials being used, the committee has safety concerns regarding the stability of such a large, unapproved structure." She had used my own words against me. She had twisted my professional explanation into a safety concern. The letter concluded, "You are hereby ordered to cease and desist all construction immediately until a new, revised set of plans for a much smaller structure is submitted and approved." A fine of $500 is also being levied for beginning work without written HOA approval. I saw red. I had my city permit. I had the law on my side. Her aesthetic covenants did not supersede public safety and building codes, which I was not only meeting, but dramatically exceeding. I tore the letter in half, then in quarters, and dropped the pieces into my trash can. I was not stopping. I was not paying. I was not going to be bullied by this petty tyrant. I went back outside, picked up my drill, and defiantly, loudly, went back to work. 2 days passed in tense, defiant silence. I finished the framing and began installing the decking itself. I was using a high-end composite material, the kind that doesn't rot, warp, or need staining. It was expensive, but it would last forever. It was quiet, too quiet. As I was screwing in the last board on the main level, a white city sedan pulled up to my house. It wasn't one of our department's F-150 trucks. This was a car from code enforcement. My blood ran cold. A man in a light blue polo shirt stepped out, holding a clipboard and something bright orange. He didn't knock. He didn't look around. He marched right up to my front door and slapped a stop work order on the glass. I walked out of my backyard, my drill still in my hand, my heart pounding in my throat. "Can I help you? Are you Mark Turner, owner of this property?" The man asked robotically, not looking at me, already typing into a handheld device. "I am," I said, "and I have a permit for this work. It's right in the window." "Doesn't matter," he said, finally looking up. His eyes were flat and bored. "An official anonymous complaint has been filed, alleging this is an unsafe and hazardous structure being built in violation of city codes. All work must stop immediately. An inspector will be assigned to do a full assessment. You are not to touch that structure, or you will face severe fines and legal action." He took a photo of the orange notice on my door, got back in his car, and drove away. I stood there, in the dead quiet of the afternoon, the smell of sawdust in the air. She had done it. Carol had bypassed the HOA. She had called the city. She had filed a formal, anonymous complaint against me, using the exact words, "unsafe and hazardous," that would trigger an immediate shutdown. She had attacked my work, my livelihood, my professional reputation, and she had just made the biggest, most catastrophic mistake of her life. She had reported an unsafe structure to the one man who could bring her entire world crashing down. She just didn't know it yet. The following Monday, I walked into the City Planning and Building Department at 7:58 a.m. I hadn't touched the deck all weekend. The bright orange stop work order was still plastered on my front door, a fluorescent badge of shame and a glaring insult to my entire career. My vacation was officially over, but I was far from relaxed. I was simmering. This had escalated beyond a petty neighbor dispute. A formal complaint of unsafe construction filed against me wasn't just an annoyance. It was a direct professional attack. It was an accusation that I, the man who signs off on the safety of skyscrapers, didn't know how to build a simple backyard deck. My colleague Sarah, who managed the front desk, looked up as I stormed past. "Hey, Mark! How was your vacation? You don't look very relaxed." "You wouldn't believe me if I told you, Sarah," I muttered, not breaking stride. I bypassed my own office and went straight to the corner office belonging to my boss, Dave Henderson. Dave was the director of the department, a 30-year veteran with a coffee mug permanently attached to his hand, and a no-nonsense attitude I'd always respected. He'd seen every scam, every shortcut, and every type of ridiculous complaint the public could invent. "Turner," he grunted, looking up from a set of blueprints. "Good vacation?" "Not exactly, Dave," I said, closing the door behind me. "We've got a problem. At my new house, I laid it all out. The new property, the overbearing HOA President, the ridiculous beige-enveloped warnings. I explained the deck specs, the 2x12 beams, the 2x10 joists spaced 12 inches on center, the 48-inch deep concrete footings. I told him how I was building it to be a bomb shelter, not just a deck. And then I told him about the stop work order. They tagged my house. "Dave, an enforcement officer came out on Friday based on an anonymous complaint." Dave's eyebrow shot up over the rim of his reading glasses. "An anonymous complaint? For an unsafe structure? Against you?" He let out a dry chuckle. "That's rich. Talk about poking the bear. All right, what's the address? 124 Elm Street, I said. He turned to his computer, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Ah, here it is. Came into the system Friday afternoon. Complaint file 2025-94C. He squinted at the screen, reading the notes from the enforcement officer. Complaint alleges, homeowner is building a large, unstable structure in the backyard. Appears to be made of unapproved materials. Fear of imminent collapse. Hazard to neighborhood children. I felt my face flush with anger. Imminent collapse? I could park a Humvee on that deck. It's the most over-engineered structure in that entire zip code. Unapproved materials? I'm using #1 grade treated lumber and AZEK composite decking. It's the best on the market. Calm down, Mark, Dave said, though a small smirk was playing on his lips. Look, it's a formal complaint. I can't just make it go away, no matter how ridiculous it is. The system already auto-flagged it as high priority because the complainant used the magic words, imminent collapse. It needs a full, formal inspection to be closed out. I slumped against the doorframe, rubbing my temples. Great, so who gets stuck with this nonsense? Who are you sending out? Jim? Maria? They're going to get there, see my work, and laugh. Well, that's the funny part, Dave said. He leaned back in his chair and folded his arms. I was looking at the duty roster this morning. According to our zone map, 124 Elm Street falls squarely into Zone 4. I stared at him, not understanding. Dave grinned. And the designated senior inspector for all of Zone 4 is... Well, look at that. Turner, Mark. My heart stopped for a second. What? Dave, you can't. That's a massive conflict of interest. I can't inspect my own house. Why not? Dave argued, leaning forward. It's your house. Who is more qualified on this entire planet to inspect it than you? You're the senior for that zone. And frankly, I am not wasting Maria's or Jim's valuable time on what is clearly a crank call from a crazy neighbor. Nope. The complaint has been officially and automatically assigned to you. It's your file now. He hit the print button. The printer in the corner whirred to life and spat out the full complaint report. Dave plucked it from the tray and held it out to me. Here, he said. Make it official. Schedule the inspection. Take the city truck. Wear the uniform. Fill out all the paperwork. Write a full detailed report on your findings and close this case out. Do it by the book, Mark. Every single letter. I want this one wrapped up tight. I took the sheaf of papers from his hand. It felt cold and heavy. The anger that had been simmering in my chest for days suddenly evaporated, replaced by something else. It was a cold, sharp, calculating clarity, a plan. By the book, I repeated, a slow, cold smile spreading across my face. You know me, Dave, always by the book. That's why you're my best guy, he said. Now get out of here. And for God's sake, Turner, go handle your own backyard mess. I walked back to my own office, not the neighbor's, and sat in my official city-issued chair. I closed the door. I looked at the complaint file, and that's when I saw the shocking truth. The complainant was listed as anonymous, but in the notes, the call taker had logged the contact number provided by the concerned citizen. I recognized it instantly. It was the number from the bottom of Carol's HOA newsletters. She had been stupid. She had been sloppy. She had given me the smoking gun. My hand moved to my desk phone, the one with the official city line. I picked up the receiver and deliberately, calmly dialed the number. She answered on the second ring, her voice sickly sweet. Carol Peterson speaking. I activated my official voice, the one I used on non-compliant contractors and slippery developers. The one that was pure cold steel. Good morning, Ms. Peterson. This is Inspector Mark Turner from the City Building and Planning Department. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end. Then a complete dead silence. I could practically hear her brain short-circuiting. Inspector. Turner, she finally stammered. I think there's been some kind of mistake. There's no mistake, ma'am, I said, my tone flat and procedural. I'm calling in reference to the formal safety complaint you filed on Friday for the property at 124 Elm Street. That's file number 2025-94C. Your complaint was routed to my desk for investigation. She was sputtering. I cut her off. As per city procedure for a high-priority complaint, I will be conducting a full, on-site inspection tomorrow morning at 10:00 a.m. As you are the complainant who provided the specific details of the imminent collapse hazard, your presence is required so you can point out your specific concerns to me directly. Tomorrow? At 10? Her voice was a high-pitched squeak. Oh, I'm not sure if I can... It's a very busy Ma'am, I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave. This is a formal safety investigation that you initiated. Failure to appear to validate your claims will be noted in my official report. I will see you at 124 Elm Street at 10 a.m. sharp. Have a good day. I hung up the phone before she could form another word. I leaned back in my chair, spinning the pen in my fingers. The game was on, and she had just handed me all the pieces. The next morning at 9:45 a.m., I backed the city's white Ford F-150, emblazoned with the official city seal on the driver's side door, into my own driveway. I didn't park in the garage. I parked it right in the middle for all the world to see. At 9:50 a.m., I got out. I wasn't Mark, the new neighbor in jeans and a t-shirt. I was Inspector Turner. I wore the pressed, dark blue polo shirt with the embroidered city emblem on the chest. I had my heavy-duty leather work belt on, holding my 25-foot tape measure, a flashlight, and a small level. Pinned to my shirt was my official city ID and badge. In my left hand, I carried the heavy-duty aluminum clipboard with the complaint file, 2025-94C, clipped firmly to the front. I saw the curtains twitch in the house across the street. And in the house next to that, good. A city truck was an event in a quiet neighborhood like Maple Creek. A public inspection was even better. At 9:58 a.m., Carol Peterson came scurrying across her perfect lawn, not with the confident stride of a queen, but with the nervous, jerky movements of someone walking into a meeting they were terrified of. Her expensive Lululemon suit was gone, replaced by a frumpy beige cardigan and khaki slacks. She looked pale, and her hair, usually perfect, seemed slightly frazzled. She was trying to intercept me before I reached the front door. Mark, good morning," she called out, forcing a high, brittle laugh. "Listen, I am so sorry about all this. It's a complete misunderstanding. I tried calling your office this morning to cancel. I didn't slow down." I stopped at the bottom of my walkway and looked at my watch. It was 10 a.m. on the dot. I turned to her, my face devoid of any emotion. "Good morning, Ms. Peterson. I am Inspector Turner. Are you here as the official complainant for file 2025-94C? Her smile faltered, the use of my title hitting her like a slap. "Well, yes, I am the one who called, but like I said, it's just a mistake. You can see," she gestured vaguely at the deck. "It looks fine, so we can just drop this. No harm, no foul." "I'm afraid that's not possible, ma'am," I said, my voice cold and procedural. "A formal complaint has been filed with the city alleging severe safety hazards and risk of imminent collapse. That complaint triggered a mandatory, full investigation. The file is open and it must be closed by a senior inspector. That's me. My job now is to create an official report on the structure. I cannot just drop it. That would be a dereliction of my duty." Her face went from pale to ashen. She had set a boulder in motion and was now standing at the bottom of the hill. "Oh," she said, her voice small. I see. "Excellent," I said, clicking my pen. "The inspection will now commence. Please follow me." I turned and strode toward my backyard, not looking back to see if she was following. I heard her small, hesitant footsteps hurrying on the gravel behind me. I walked onto the lawn and stopped, taking in my own deck with a cold, critical eye. I held up the clipboard. "Let's review the complaint. You, the complainant, allege that this structure is unstable, is made of unapproved materials, and most seriously, is in danger of imminent collapse, posing a hazard to neighborhood children. Is that correct?" I mean, it looked excessive," she stammered, wringing her hands. "I will take that as a yes," I said. "Let's start with the foundation. The claim is unstable." I walked to the edge of the deck, where one of the 6x6 support posts was visible, and knelt, pulling my tape measure from my belt. I hooked it onto the concrete footing I had purposefully left exposed for just this reason. "Ma'am, can you please look at this?" She leaned in reluctantly. The city code for a structure of this size requires a 12-inch diameter footing, 36 inches deep. As you can see, I snapped the tape. This footing is 18 inches in diameter. And my permit file, which I have right here, includes the photographs of the dig, showing all 12 footings at a depth of 48 inches. This foundation doesn't just meet code. It exceeds the code requirement for a structure twice this size. My finding, the claim of unstable, is false. I stood up and moved to the framing underneath. "Next, your complaint, which I have on record from your call, stated it was heavy and looked like it would collapse." I pointed my pen upward. "These are 210 joists. The city code allows for spacing of 16 inches on center. As you can see, these are spaced 12 inches on center, increasing the load-bearing capacity by over 50%. All joists are seated in G185 hot-dip galvanized hangers, secured with 1.5-inch 10D connector nails, not cheaper, unapproved fasteners. I stepped onto the deck itself and stomped down with my full weight, my steel-toed boot making a solid thud. The structure didn't vibrate. It didn't shake. It didn't move at all. As you can see, this deck is rock solid. It could support a hot tub, a grand piano, and half the neighborhood. My finding: the claim of imminent collapse is demonstrably false and, frankly, absurd. Carol was looking at the deck, then at me, and then at the ground, her face burning with a mixture of humiliation and fear. I'm not an expert. Clearly, I said, cutting her off. Which brings me to the final allegation: unapproved materials. I walked over to a scrap piece of the composite decking I had left by the steps. I picked it up. This is ASIC decking, a high-performance cellular PVC. It is not unapproved wood. It has an ICC ES evaluation report, number ESR 1667, which is pre-approved by the City Building Code. It has a Class A flame spread rating and is fully compliant for all residential applications. I dropped the heavy piece on the ground with a thud. My finding: the claim of unapproved materials is false. I took out my official city camera and began taking photos of the footings, the tape measure, the joist spacing, the hangers. I was documenting my inspection, creating an official record of my own compliance and, by extension, the absolute baseless nature of her complaint. Finally, I turned back to her and unclipped the top sheet from the clipboard. It was the official inspection report. Ms. Peterson, after a thorough and complete inspection, I am finding that complaint file 2025-94C is entirely without merit. The structure at 124 Elm Street not only meets all city, state, and national building codes, but it exceeds them in every relevant category. It is, in my professional opinion, a textbook example of safe, durable, and compliant construction. I will be closing this file as unfounded. A massive, visible wave of relief washed over her. She thought it was over. "Oh, thank you, Mark. I mean, Inspector," she breathed, starting to back away. "Thank you so much. I am so terribly, terribly sorry for the mix-up. I'll get out of your hair." She turned to flee back to the safety of her own yard. "I'm not finished, ma'am," I said. My voice stopped her dead in her tracks. She turned back slowly, the fear and confusion flooding back into her face. "What? But—" "You said, 'You're closing the file.' I am closing the file on my house," I said, my voice flat and cold. "But you see, Ms. Peterson, you've created a new problem. You filed a formal false complaint using incendiary language like imminent collapse. That is a serious offense. It wastes valuable city time and resources, which my director, Mr. Henderson, takes a very dim view of." I paused, letting the weight of that sink in. "And furthermore, your complaint has brought me, in my official capacity as a senior city inspector, to this neighborhood. And while I am here, on the clock and in a city vehicle, I am legally bound by my duty to investigate any and all potential code violations and public safety hazards that I observe in plain sight. It is not optional. It is my job." I lifted my head and looked past her, down the street, my eyes landing on the brick and siding building with the large sparkling pool behind a wrought iron fence. "The HOA clubhouse. You are the HOA president, are you not? That means you are the responsible party for the common areas, correct?" "Yes, I am, but—" "Excellent," I said, clipping the closed file back onto my clipboard and adding a new blank inspection sheet to the top. I clicked my pen. "Let's take a walk, shall we?" I began striding down the public sidewalk toward the community clubhouse, which was about 3 houses down from mine. My steel-toed boots made a firm, rhythmic thud on the concrete. Carol had no choice but to follow, practically jogging to keep up. She was no longer the queen bee. She was the flustered assistant scrambling behind the man in charge. "Inspector, wait. You can't. That's private property," she protested, her voice regaining a trace of its old indignation. "It's a community facility, Ms. Peterson," I said without turning around, my voice projecting clearly. "It's classified as a public accommodation under state law, which means it's governed by commercial and public safety codes, not the more lenient residential ones. Your complaint brought me to this neighborhood in an official capacity. I am now executing my sworn duty by observing and acting upon any violations in plain sight. Are you, as the HOA President, refusing me access to a facility you are responsible for? No, of course not, but, she stammered, clearly panicked by the legal implication. She knew she was trapped. We reached the wrought iron gate to the pool area. It was a nice-looking fence, at least 6 feet high, designed to look imposing. But I had already noticed the flaw. I pushed the heavy gate wide open, and then I let it go. It swung slowly, creaked on its rusty hinges, and came to a stop with a soft clack, leaving a gap of about 6 inches. It didn't close. It didn't latch. I muttered, a performative sound of concern. I pulled out my digital camera from my belt and took a photo of the gap. What? Carol snapped, her patience gone. It's just an old gate. It's an old, non-compliant gate, I corrected her, writing on my new report sheet. Per State Health and Safety Code, or 15926, all pool enclosure gates must be equipped with self-closing and self-latching devices that are capable of closing and latching automatically when released from any position. This one, I gestured to the gap, is not. This is a critical safety violation. This is how a toddler wanders in and drowns, Ms. Peterson. This isn't a minor issue. It's a clear and present drowning hazard. Her face lost all its color. The pool company? They're supposed to check that. The ultimate responsibility falls on the property owner. That is the HOA. That is you, I said, pushing the gate open and stepping onto the pool deck. I let the gate swing shut behind me, where it once again failed to latch. My eyes scanned the area. The pool itself looked clean, but my focus wasn't on the water. It was on the hardware. I walked directly to the shallow end and peered into the water, pointing at the main drain cover at the bottom. That drain cover, I said. It's cracked. I can see the fracture from here. More importantly, it appears to be an older single-suction design with a flat grate. A what? She asked, her voice trembling. A VGB non-compliant cover, I said. The Virginia Graham-Baker Pool and Spa Safety Act. It's a federal law passed in 2007 to prevent suction entrapment, which is when a person, usually a child, gets their hair or a limb stuck to one of these drains and is held underwater. I looked at her. This cracked, non-compliant cover is not just a violation. It's a massive multi-million-dollar lawsuit waiting to happen. This pool must be closed and drained immediately until a new, certified anti-entrapment cover is installed. I took another photo. Carol was visibly shaking now, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Furthermore, I continued, moving my gaze to the wall. Your pool rules sign is missing the mandatory no diving in shallow end language, required by Paragraph 3119B5. The required CPR sign with emergency procedures is faded and appears to be from 1995. It's completely outdated. And the emergency phone? I strode over to the red emergency box mounted on the clubhouse wall. I opened the door and lifted the receiver to my ear. Silence. No dial tone. No hum. Nothing. I clicked the hook switch several times. It's dead, I announced to the empty air. Completely non-functional. Another critical safety failure. In the event of an emergency, a drowning, a heart attack. This is useless. Carol looked like she was going to be physically sick. I didn't know. I can't know everything. We pay a management company. Ignorance is not a defense, Ms. Peterson, I said, my voice like ice. The board is responsible. My attention now turned to the clubhouse itself. It was a small brick building with a large, covered outdoor kitchen pavilion, the area where residents held barbecues and parties. Nice structure you have here, I said, walking toward it. I spotted it instantly. The electrical outlets. They were standard, cheap, two-plug outlets, dotted along the back wall, right next to a built-in sink and a mini-fridge. Ms. Peterson, are you familiar with a GFCI? A what? A ground fault circuit interrupter, I said. It's a device that cuts power in milliseconds if it detects an imbalance, preventing a fatal electric shock. The National Electrical Code, which the city has adopted, has required them for decades for any outlet within 20 feet of a water source, like this sink, or that entire swimming pool. I pulled the small, three-pronged outlet tester from my belt pouch and plugged it into the socket nearest the sink. No lights. I pressed the test button. Nothing happened. No protection. And this one, and this one. I went down the line, plugging my tester into all 6 outlets. None, not a single one is GFCI protected. That is a clear, immediate electrocution hazard, ma'am. Someone with wet feet from the pool plugs in a blender for their margarita, and they're dead. Their kids find them. I looked up at the ceiling of the pavilion. The electrical work was shoddy, with exposed Romex cables stapled haphazardly to the underside of the rafters. A clear violation of NEC paragraph 334 and 15. When did you have this outdoor kitchen installed? About 2 years ago, I think, she muttered. It was an upgrade. The residents loved it. I'm sure they did, I said. And I'm sure you got the required permits for this new structural pavilion and the extensive electrical work. Her silence was the only answer I needed. I pulled out my city-issued tablet, logged into the permit database, and typed in the clubhouse's address. The screen glowed with the property's history, just as I thought. No permits have been filed for this property in over 8 years. This entire kitchen, this roof, this slab, and all this dangerous wiring, it's all unpermitted, uninspected work. I turned to her. My voice was quiet, but it carried the full weight of my authority. Ms. Peterson, you are the president of an association that is operating an illegal, unpermitted community facility with multiple critical safety failures. You have immediate drowning hazards, entrapment hazards, and electrocution hazards. As a sworn senior inspector for this city, I have no choice. I walked back to my truck, unlocked the cab, and pulled out my roll of bright red danger tape. I walked back to the failed gate. Carol just stood there, paralyzed, as I began wrapping the tape around and around the handles, sealing it shut. This facility, I announced, is hereby deemed unsafe for human occupancy. It is condemned and closed to the public, effective immediately. Entry is prohibited. I tore off a large red condemnation tag from my roll, filled it out, listing the primary violations. On Run 26, for 3119B, NEC per 210.8, and wired it firmly to the gate. The fines, which will be substantial, will be sent by certified mail to the HOA's registered address. Do not, under any circumstances, remove this tape or this tag. That is a criminal offense. Carol just stared at the red tag, her mouth open, her entire world of petty rules and beige envelopes crumbling around her. The pool was her pride and joy, the center of her social empire. And I had just shut it down. You can't do this, she finally whispered, the anger and shock warring for control. This is retaliation. This is me doing my job, Ms. Peterson, I said, capping my pen. The job you called me out here to do. I addressed your safety concern. Now I'm addressing the real ones you've been ignoring. Do you have any other questions? She just stared at me, speechless. Good, I said, giving the red tag one last firm tug. Now, if you'll excuse me, I noticed one more thing on the way over. I turned and started walking. This time toward her house. I turned and started walking. Not back to my truck, but across the street and 2 houses down toward Carol's perfect colonial-style home. She followed me, no longer protesting, but stumbling in a dazed, horrified silence. Her mind was clearly still back at the red-tagged pool, calculating the financial and social cost of that disaster. She was not prepared for the fact that I was not finished. I stopped on the public sidewalk, a few feet from her property line. Mark, Inspector, what are you doing? She finally whispered, her voice hoarse. This is my home. You can't. I am standing on a public right-of-way, Ms. Peterson, I said, not looking at her. My full attention was on the structure that defined her front yard. Her house sat on a slight slope, and the entire yard was raised about 4 feet above the sidewalk, held back by a long, curving wall of decorative, interlocking stone blocks. It was designed to look grand. To my trained eye, it looked like a catastrophe in progress. I'd noticed it the day I moved in, but it hadn't been my business. Now, thanks to her, it was. But that's just landscaping, she stammered. It's a garden wall. No, ma'am, I said, crouching down to get a better look at the base. Per the International Building Code, any wall that retains more than 36 inches of soil, or any wall that supports a surcharge load, like, say, an entire front lawn, is not landscaping. It is a structure, and as such, it requires a building permit, engineered plans, and a full set of inspections. I pointed to the top of the wall, where the neat line of capstones was visibly bowing outward, leaning toward the sidewalk. See that? That's called cant, or positive displacement. That is a sign of failure. Now, look at the base. I ran my hand along the bottom row of blocks. There are no weep holes. There is no visible gravel drainage system. That means that every time it rains, tons of water, hydrostatic pressure, builds up in the soil behind this wall, acting like a hydraulic ram. It is pushing this entire structure, inch by inch, onto the public sidewalk. I pulled out my camera again and started taking photos. Click. The bowing top. Click. The cracked mortar in one corner. Click. The base, showing the complete lack of drainage. This wall is failing, Ms. Peterson, I said, straightening up. And it is failing over a public right-of-way. If this thing lets go and buries a kid walking home from school, the city is liable. And I, having observed it, am now legally bound to act. It's been there for years. The man who sold us the house, then it's been failing for years, I said. And your ignorance of the code doesn't grant you immunity from it. I looked up from the wall, my eyes scanning the rest of her perfect property. And that's when I saw it. Tucked away on the side of her house, partially hidden by a row of neatly trimmed hedges, was an addition. It was a flimsy-looking structure of glass and white aluminum, a sunroom tacked onto the side of the house. It was cheap. It didn't match the colonial architecture, and the flashing where the aluminum roof met the brick veneer looked like it had been done with a caulk gun by a complete amateur. My gaze locked onto it. Carol followed my line of sight. She went absolutely rigid. "And what?" I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. "Is that?" The silence that followed was deafening. This was different from her flustered protests about the pool. This was the cold, hard silence of guilt. That's my sunroom," she finally said, her voice barely audible. "I see. An all-seasons room. An occupied addition to the primary residential structure," I said. I started walking slowly down the sidewalk, past her property, to get a better view of it. She stayed rooted in place, watching me. I could see the shoddy foundation. It looked like it was just sitting on deck blocks, not a proper concrete footing. "I'm sure," I said, loud enough for her to hear me, "that you got the full set of permits for that, Ms. Peterson." She didn't answer. Her silence was my answer. "Because, ma'am, building an occupied conditioned space without permits is one of the most serious violations a homeowner can commit. It means no inspection of the foundation, no inspection of the framing, no inspection of the electrical work." I pointed to the tangle of wires I could see running under the cheap aluminum frame. "Uninspected electrical in a metal structure. That's not a hazard, ma'am. That's a fire. That's a death trap." I shook my head, feigning sympathy. "And the foundation, if it's not proper, an unpermitted addition like this can cause catastrophic damage to your actual house. It can pull the entire wall away. Your insurance wouldn't cover a penny of it." I walked back to my truck, my footsteps echoing in the silence. Carol followed me, a zombie in a beige cardigan. She looked like she was going to faint. What are you going to do?" she whispered. "I'm going to do my job," I said. I reached into my truck and pulled out not one but two new blank violation notice pads. I leaned against the hood of the city truck and began to write. "This is," she started, her voice breaking. "This is harassment. You're doing this because of the complaint. This is retaliation. I'm going to call your boss. I'm going to call the mayor." I stopped writing and looked her dead in the eyes. My voice was cold, flat, and final. "Ms. Peterson, you are accusing a city official of illegal retaliation. That is a criminal allegation." "Are you sure you want to make that claim?" "Because I have a city-issued audio recorder on my belt that has been recording this entire inspection, as per procedure. It has recorded me finding multiple immediate life-threatening hazards that you, as HOA President, were negligent in addressing. And it has recorded me finding severe, unpermitted work on your own property after you summoned me here by filing a false report." I held up my pen. "You want to call my boss? Please do. Director Henderson will be delighted to listen to this tape. He will be thrilled to know you are accusing his best inspector of retaliation for doing his job. Shall I get you his direct number?" She deflated. All the fight, all the Karen energy drained out of her, leaving a pale, trembling shell. She said nothing. I finished writing. I tore the first sheet from the pad and walked over to her failing retaining wall. I used a piece of tape to affix it directly to the bowing stone. "Warning, unsafe structure, failure imminent." "This notice gives you 30 days, I said, "to hire a state-licensed structural engineer to assess this wall and draw up plans for its full demolition and replacement. You will then apply for the proper permits, and you will rebuild it to code at your expense. If you fail to do so, the city will hire a contractor to tear it down, And we will bill you for the cost, plus a 200% administrative fee, and place a lien on your property. Her eyes glazed over as she calculated the cost. $20,000. $30,000? And this one, I said, holding up the second notice, is for the illegal sunroom. This is an order to abate. I walked over and stuck it on her front door, right next to her decorative wreath. You have two choices. Option A, demolish and completely remove the illegal structure within 60 days. Option B, you can try to get a retroactive permit. This will involve paying 4 times the normal permit fees as a penalty. You will then be required to hire an architect to draw as-built plans, and you will have to tear out every single wall, all the interior and exterior coverings, so that I, or another inspector, can inspect the foundation, the framing, and the electrical. If we find any of it is not to code, which I guarantee you it is not, you will have to tear it down anyway. Your choice. She looked at the violation on her door, then at the violation on her wall, then at the red-tagged clubhouse down the street. She had built an empire of petty rules, and it had just been condemned and demolished in the span of 20 minutes. I walked back to my truck and put my clipboard away. I turned to face her one last time. She was just standing on her perfect lawn, a statue of ruin, with 2 official violation notices decorating her property. My work here appears to be done, I said, my voice neutral. Thank you for your concern for public safety, Ms. Peterson. You have done the community a great service today by alerting my department to these multiple severe hazards. Have a wonderful afternoon. I got in my truck, started the engine, and drove away, leaving her alone in the quiet, perfect, and catastrophically non-compliant neighborhood she ruled. When I walked back into the air-conditioned stillness of the building department at 11:30 a.m., the adrenaline from the field had subsided, replaced by the cold, calm focus of the paperwork to come. My clipboard was now heavy with notes, my camera full of time-stamped photographic evidence. This was the part of the job that wasn't dramatic, but it was the most important. This was where I forged the weapons. My boss, Dave Henderson, was waiting by my desk, a fresh mug of coffee in his hand. He'd clearly been watching the clock. Well? He asked, his face a perfect mask of managerial neutrality. Did your deck fall down? Are we going to be on the news? Solid as a rock, Dave, I said, dropping the heavy clipboard onto my desk with a satisfying thud. I closed complaint file 2025-94C. Unfounded. I've got photos of the 18-inch footings, the 12-inch joist spacing, the whole 9 yards. It's a fortress. The report is on top. Dave picked it up, scanned it, and nodded. Good, a clean close. That's that then. Waste of a morning, but oh, I wasn't finished, Dave, I said. I pulled the other 2, freshly started report sheets from under the first one. While I was on site in an official capacity, I couldn't help but notice a few other issues. Significant ones, Dave's eyebrow raised. Oh, you don't say? Do tell. The HOA common area, the pool and clubhouse. I laid it all out, my voice the same professional monotone I'd used on Carol. The pool gate is non-compliant, fails to self-latch. It's a critical drowning hazard. The main drain cover is a non-VGB, single-suction, cracked model. That's a federal entrapment violation. The emergency phone is dead. The entire outdoor kitchen pavilion is unpermitted. No GFCI outlets within 20 feet of the pool, which is a massive electrocution hazard. Dave's face had gone from curious to grim. Jesus, Turner. Those aren't petty violations. Those are multi-million-dollar lawsuit violations. That's the city getting sued for negligence. You shut it down, right? Condemned the entire facility. Red tagged and locked, I confirmed. And then, I said, I noticed the HOA President's own house. 122 Elm. You're kidding me, Dave said, a small dark grin finally appearing. What did you find? A 4-foot retaining wall on her front lawn, leaning over the public sidewalk. No drainage, no engineering, no permit. It's in a state of imminent failure. I tagged it as an unsafe structure. It's a public hazard. Good. That's another liability off our books. Dave nodded. And to top it off, a 200-square-foot all-season sunroom built onto the side of her house. It's sitting on deck blocks, not a foundation. The electrical is a mess. It's a complete 100% unpermitted illegal addition. Dave just stared at me for a long second, and then he let out a low whistle. My God, Mark, she really poked the wrong bear. She calls in a false, petty complaint about the safest deck in the state, and in return, you legally condemn her community pool and half her personal property. I just followed the book, Dave, I said, shrugging. Like you told me to. I observed hazards in plain sight and took appropriate action to protect the public and the city. Dave clapped me on the shoulder, his grin widening. You're damn right you did. That's the best morning's work I've seen in a year. Now write it all up. I want these notices out today. I want them sent certified mail, return receipt requested. I want to know they got this payload. Get to it. I sat down at my desk. This was my element. For the next hour, I composed the official notices, the bureaucratic missiles that would deliver the financial storm. Document 1, the HOA. I drafted the letter to the Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association. At HOA President Carol Peterson, I listed, in excruciating detail, every single code violation, from Health and Safety Code Purdue 5926, the gate, to NEC Purdue 10.8, the GFCIs. I formally stated that the facility was condemned and deemed unsafe for human occupancy. Then came the financial part. I listed the initial administrative fines for the violations, $1,000 for the gate, $2,500 for the drain, $500 for each non-GFCI outlet, $10,000 for the unpermitted commercial use structure. The initial bill, just in fines, was over $15,000. Then came the order to comply. It stated they must hire licensed contractors and engineers to bring the entire facility up to code, which would require tearing out all the non-compliant work. I conservatively estimated the cost of repairs would be between $75,000 and $100,000. This was the bomb that would require the special assessment I knew would be her social death. Nell Document 2, the wall. I drafted the first letter to Carol and Robert Peterson, 122 Elm Street. I attached the high-resolution, time-stamped photos of the failing wall. I cited the IBC code for retaining structures. The order was simple. You have 30 days to hire a state-licensed structural engineer to submit plans for its full demolition and replacement. You must then obtain a permit and complete the work within 90 days. The cost to her? I estimated a new, properly engineered 4-foot wall of that length would be, at minimum, $25,000. Document 3, the sunroom. This was the masterpiece. I pulled her property file from our records. Just as I thought. No permits of any kind since the house was built in 1978. The sunroom was 100% illegal. I drafted the order to abate. I clearly listed her two terrible options. Option A, demolish and completely remove the illegal 10-foot by 20-foot structure and its foundation within 60 days. Option B, apply for a retroactive permit. I explained in detail what this meant. Paying a penalty fee of 4 times the original permit cost, approximately $8,000. Hiring an architect to draw as-built plans, and, the best part, completely disassembling the structure by removing all interior and exterior wall and ceiling coverings so that an inspector, me, could examine the raw framing, electrical wiring, and foundation. I knew, and she would soon find out, that the cost to do this would be more than the cost of a new, legally built sunroom. I was giving her a choice, but it was an illusion. At 2:01 p.m., I had 3 large official city envelopes on my desk. I ran them through the postage machine, the meter stamping them with heavy official block numbers. I then took a large red ink pad and stamped each one. Certified mail. Return receipt requested. I dropped them into the outgoing mail bin. The storm was official. The paperwork was filed. This wasn't hot-headed, impulsive revenge. This was cold, calculated, and perfectly documented bureaucratic justice, delivered via the very system she had tried to weaponize against me. She had started a paper war, not realizing I was the one who manufactured the ammunition. The thunder cracked exactly 3 days later. It came not as a beige envelope, but as a frantic, neon pink A4-sized paper shoved into my door and every other door in the neighborhood. Emergency HOA meeting, mandatory attendance. Topic: unwarranted city condemnation of common areas and impending special assessment. The meeting was set for that evening at 7 p.m. The location, the clubhouse lawn. The irony was delicious. They couldn't even meet in their clubhouse because of me. I marked my calendar. This was a command performance I wouldn't miss for the world. When I arrived at 6:55 p.m., the air was electric. It felt less like a neighborhood meeting and more like a lynch mob gathering. Nearly every homeowner was there, at least 50 or so people, all standing in angry, tight clusters on the grass. The focal point of their anger was the clubhouse itself, now a symbol of their frustration. My red condemnation tag fluttered on the pool gate under the setting sun, and the danger tape I had strung was gleaming. Under the porch lights, Carol and the rest of the board, two uncomfortable-looking men in golf shirts and another woman clutching a binder, were standing at the front by a flimsy folding table. Carol looked like she hadn't slept in 3 days. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her usual perfect blonde bob was frazzled, and her skin was a pale, sickly color. The queen was in her bunker and the walls were closing in. She saw me walk up. Her eyes narrowed into slits of pure, unadulterated hatred. I just gave her a polite, neutral nod and stood at the back of the crowd, crossing my arms. Carol banged a small gavel on the table. "Order, order! Thank you all for coming. As you can see, we have a situation. A grave situation. A man in the front row, who I recognized as my next-door neighbor Bob, spoke up. His voice was loud and angry. A situation, Carol? The pool is closed! It's 90 degrees. My kids are crying, and I just got a notice in the mail about a potential special assessment that could be over $2,000. What the hell is going on? An angry rumble went through the crowd. The $2,000 figure was new to me, but it sounded like a reasonable, if low, estimate for the repairs. I'm getting to that, Bob. Carol snapped, her voice high and strained. We have been attacked. We have been targeted by an overzealous, vindictive city inspector who has filed a laundry list of minor, petty, technical violations. Minor? A woman shouted from the crowd. The tag on the gate says electrocution hazard and drowning hazard. That's not minor. It's bureaucratic overreach. Carol shrieked, her voice cracking. It's a gross abuse of power, and it happened. She paused for dramatic effect. Immediately after this, HOA was forced to send a few simple compliance warnings to our newest neighbor. She turned, her body rigid, and raised a long, trembling finger, pointing directly at me. Him! Mark Turner! 50 heads swiveled in unison. 50 pairs of angry eyes locked onto me. I was the new guy, the outsider, and now I was the villain. He works for the city, Carol yelled, feeding the mob. He's a building inspector. He was angry because we told him his enormous unsafe deck violated HOA rules, so he used his position to retaliate against all of us. He is punishing our children, your children, because he didn't get his way. This entire financial mess is his fault. The explosion of outrage was immediate and deafening. What the hell, man? Bob yelled at me. You did this? To all of us? Over a deck? People were taking angry steps toward me. That's abuse of power. Who do you think you are? I held up a hand. I didn't shout. I waited for a brief lull, and then I walked calmly and slowly from the back of the crowd to the front, stopping right next to Carol's table. I turned to face my new neighbors. I looked at Bob. I looked at the angry woman. I looked at all of them. Then I turned and looked at Carol. She's right about one thing, I said, my voice cutting through the noise. I am a building inspector. I'm Senior Inspector Mark Turner. I turned back to the crowd. But she is lying to you about everything else, Carol gasped. How dare you? I didn't target this community, I said, my voice hard and clear. I was summoned here. I was brought here by a formal, anonymous complaint filed with the city. A complaint, as it turns out, that came from Ms. Peterson's phone number. A complaint that falsely alleged my deck, which is permitted and over-engineered to be one of the safest structures in this state, was an imminent collapse hazard. I let that sink in. The crowd was silent, processing this new information. Once I am on site in an official capacity, I continued, I am legally obligated to address any and all public safety hazards I observe. It's not a choice. It's not retaliation. It's my sworn duty. And what I found here, I gestured to the red-taped pool, wasn't petty. It was horrifying. I pointed to the gate. I found a pool gate that doesn't latch. A gate a 2-year-old could push open and wander through. That's a drowning hazard. I pointed to the pool. I found a cracked, illegal drain cover that violates the Virginia Graham-Baker Act, a federal law. That's an entrapment hazard that could trap and drown your child. I pointed to the clubhouse wall. I found 6 electrical outlets right next to the pool, none of them GFCI protected. That's an electrocution hazard that could have killed the first person to plug in a blender with wet feet. I pointed to the emergency phone box. And I found an emergency phone that was dead. Useless. I turned my full attention back to Carol, my voice dropping to an icy calm. This isn't retaliation, Ms. Peterson. This is gross negligence. Your negligence. For years you have let this facility decay into a death trap. You risked the lives of every man, woman, and child in this neighborhood, all while you were busy writing letters about the color of someone's mailbox. The silence was absolute. The neighbors were no longer looking at me. They were all staring at Carol. Bob was the first to speak. His voice was low and dangerous. So let me get this straight. Our pool was a death trap? All this time? My kids, they swim here every day, the angry woman whispered, her face pale with shock. This special assessment, Bob said, his voice rising. This $2,000. It's not to pay for his retaliation. It's to pay for your incompetence. I didn't know, Carol cried, all pretense of control gone. We pay a management company. It's their job. It's your job to oversee them, another man yelled. It's your job as president. You've put all of us at risk. You've made all of us liable. The mob's anger, which had been a fire aimed at me, had now turned 180 degrees. It was a tidal wave of fury, and it was all crashing down on Carol. She was backing away from the table, her hands held up as if to ward off a physical blow. And what about your house, Carol? A voice called from the back. It was the same quiet man who had been watching. It's not just the pool, is it? I saw you on your lawn with the inspector. And this morning I saw a big red unsafe tag on your own retaining wall. And I saw another one on your front door. A new shocked silence fell over the crowd. Bob's eyes went wide. He looked at Carol, then at me. Is that true, Inspector? I just nodded, remaining silent. I didn't need to say another word. My God, Carol, Bob whispered, the contempt in his voice thick. You've been terrorizing this neighborhood for years about stupid petty rules. And your own house is falling apart? You're a hypocrite, a fraud. You can't, Carol stammered. I call for a vote. Bob roared, pointing a finger at her. A vote of no confidence. Right now. I want her out. Vote, vote. The crowd began to chant, advancing on the folding table. Carol's two board members took 2 giant steps away from her, deserting her completely. She was alone, surrounded, and her entire petty empire had just been publicly and spectacularly demolished. The chant of vote was rhythmic and brutal. It wasn't a request. It was a demand. Carol was pressed back against the folding table, her face a mask of white-hot panic. Her 2 board member allies, seeing their own impending doom, had physically stepped away from her, creating a visible zone of isolation. All right, Bob roared, holding up his hands to silence the crowd. His voice was full of newfound authority. This isn't a mob. We're going to do this by the book. He picked up the binder Carol's colleague had dropped. According to the bylaws, Article 12, Section 4, a vote of no confidence and immediate removal of a board member can be called at any emergency meeting with a quorum. We have a quorum, he glared at Carol. I, Bob Riley, move to remove Carol Peterson from the HOA board, effective immediately, for gross negligence, willful endangerment of the community, and financial malfeasance. Seconded, the woman who had been worried about her kids shouted. All in favor say aye, Bob yelled. Hey! The sound was a single visceral roar. It was the collective, pent-up frustration of years of petty tyranny being released in one explosive sound. I saw at least 45 hands shoot up, including those of the other 2 board members. All opposed? Bob asked. A formality. Carol just stood there shaking, her mouth opening and closing, but no sound coming out. A single choked sob was her only answer. The motion passes, Bob said, his voice cold. Carol, you are officially removed. You are no longer president. You are no longer on the board. Give me the keys to the clubhouse office. You can't, she finally whispered, tears of rage and humiliation streaming down her face. I will sue every single one of you. This is illegal. You do that, Carol, Bob said, snatching the keys from the table where she had dropped them. I'm sure that will go over well when your lawyer sees the city's condemnation report. Now this meeting is for homeowners only. Get off this common property. You're just a resident now. A resident with a lot of fines to pay. That was the final blow. The public humiliation was total. She looked around, her eyes wild, searching for a single friendly face. She found none. Every neighbor, even those who had been her friends, just stared at her with cold contempt. She let out a sound, half scream, half sob, then turned, stumbled off the curb, and ran. She fled across the lawns, back to the sanctuary of her own house, the only place she had left. The crowd watched her go, and a tense, awkward silence fell. The anger was gone, replaced by the staggering, expensive reality of the situation. Bob, now the de facto leader, rubbed his face, looking exhausted. "My God," he muttered. He then turned to the crowd, and finally his eyes landed on me. He walked over, his face grim. "Inspector. Mark, first off, I apologize. On behalf of the neighborhood, we didn't know." "It's all right, Bob," I said. "You know now." "Yeah," he said, looking at the red tag gate. "We're in a hell of a mess, aren't we? This $100,000 you mentioned, and the special assessment. We're completely lost here. We're just a bunch of software guys and accountants." He looked at me, his expression pleading. "You're the expert. You're the one who found all this. We need help. Would you be willing to, I don't know, help us fix this?" As a neighbor? The entire neighborhood was listening. This was the critical moment. I had the power to walk away and let them flail, or I could become part of the community I had just accidentally taken over. "I'll help," I said. The collective sigh of relief was audible. But we have to be very clear about the boundaries. I cannot and will not act as the official city inspector for these repairs. That's a massive conflict of interest. The city will have to assign another inspector, probably my colleague, Jim, and trust me, he's tougher than I am, to sign off on the permits and the final work. That has to be completely above board. "Understood," Bob said, nodding. "But," I continued, "as a neighbor? As a resident of Maple Creek?" "Absolutely. I'll help you write the request for proposal. I'll sit with the new board and review every bid you get from contractors. I can tell you who's lying, who's overcharging, and who's trying to cut corners. I'll look at their plans before you submit them to the city to make sure they're right the first time. I'll help you get this done, and get it done right." A woman in the front row actually burst into tears of relief. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you, Mark," Bob said, and this time he stuck out his hand. I shook it firmly. "Okay, folks," he yelled to the crowd. "We have a plan, and we have an expert. We're going to clean up Carol's mess starting right now." The meeting shifted instantly into problem-solving mode. They were energized. I'd given them a path forward. I'd done my part. I gave Bob a final nod and quietly slipped away from the back of the crowd, walking back toward my house under the streetlights. As I passed Carol's home, the lights were on, and the scene inside was pure chaos. I could see her through the big picture window. She wasn't just crying. She was raging. She was screaming into her phone, her face purple, gesticulating wildly. As I watched, she grabbed a ceramic vase from a side table and hurled it against the wall, where it shattered. On her front lawn, the orange spray paint on her unsafe wall seemed to glow under the streetlights. On her front door, the order to abate was still visible, stuck to the wood. Her perfect manicured world, built on an illusion of superiority and a foundation of petty rules, was crumbling. And in this case, the crumbling was literal. I walked on, turned up my own driveway, and went into my dark, quiet house. I grabbed a cold beer from the fridge and went out the back. I stepped onto my deck. I stomped my foot. It didn't move. It was solid, square, and true. I sat down on the top step, the composite boards cool beneath me. I heard the distant, angry shouting from Carol's house, and then the much closer, energized sound of my neighbors starting to fix the community. I took a long drink. The takedown was complete. The next few weeks brought a new kind of noise to Maple Creek Estates. It wasn't the oppressive, judgmental silence of Carol's reign. It was the sound of progress. It was the sound of concrete saws cutting the non-compliant pool deck, the whir of electricians pulling new grounded wires, and the thump of hammers as a licensed crew began the proper, permitted construction of the clubhouse kitchen. The neighborhood was a construction zone, and it had never felt more peaceful. Bob, thrust into his new role as interim HOA President, was a man transformed. He was stressed, but he was organized. He held open, transparent meetings on his front lawn. The first order of business was the special assessment. When the final official bill from the city arrived, along with the contractor bids, the total was a staggering $110,000. It worked out to just over $2,100 per household. Nobody was happy, but for the first time, everyone knew exactly what they were paying for. Not a vague property value slush fund, but a new safe pool gate, a federal law-compliant drain, and electrical wiring that wouldn't kill their children. I kept my promise. As a neighbor, I sat in on the bid meetings. The new board would slide me the proposals, and I'd red pen them in the margins. "This plumbing contractor is charging you 30% over market," I'd murmur. "This electrician is good, but make sure they specify copper, not aluminum-clad wire." I spotted one contractor trying to bill for a deep soil engineering report for the kitchen slab, a completely unnecessary $5,000 charge. I saved them that money with a single sentence. I had gone from the neighborhood pariah to its most valuable asset. The respect I got was real, earned not through fear, but through competence. The city, as promised, sent out another inspector to oversee the HOA's new permits. Dave assigned Jim, a notorious hard-ass who I knew would miss nothing. Jim came out, clipboard in hand, and gave the contractors hell. It was beautiful. He signed off on the final inspection 3 weeks later, and the pool reopened with a new self-latching gate that clicked shut with a deeply satisfying sound. And what of Carol? Her fall was as quiet as her rain was loud. The for sale sign appeared on her lawn exactly 1 week after the emergency meeting. The financial storm I had unleashed was simply unsurvivable. She was facing the $2,100 special assessment like everyone else, but that was just the start. I saw the estimate left on her door by the masonry company for the retaining wall, $2,850, and that was on top of the $5,000 it cost her to have a demolition crew come and tear down her illegal, shame-filled sunroom, hauling it away in a single dumpster. She was financially ruined by her own hand. She and her husband held no garage sale. They didn't say goodbye. One Tuesday morning, a moving truck came. They loaded their things in silence and they were gone. The house, with its scarred front lawn and bare concrete slab on the side, sat empty for a week before the sold sticker went up. The house was bought by a young family, a software engineer named Mike, his wife, and their 2 young kids. The first thing they did was come over and introduce themselves, holding a 6-pack of beer. "Hey, you're Mark, right?" Mike said, shaking my hand warmly. We heard you're the guy to know, the one who, fixed the neighborhood." "I just build decks," I said, smiling. "That's actually why I'm here," he said, laughing. "I'm thinking of building a treehouse for the kids, and I was wondering, if I got the plans, would you mind just glancing at them? I want to make sure it's, safe." The request, the simple, respectful question, was the true victory. I had gone from reported for unsafe construction to the neighborhood's trusted expert on safety. "I'd be happy to, Mike," I said. "Welcome to Maple Creek." A month later, on a perfect Saturday afternoon, I was finally doing what I had set out to do 3 months earlier. I was sitting on my finished deck. It was a masterpiece. The composite boards were warm under my feet. The railings were solid. The structure was, as I knew, a fortress. I had a cold beer in my hand, and a steak was sizzling on the grill. The air was filled with a new sound. It was the sound of life. It was the sound of splashing and shouting from the end of the street. Mike's kids and Bob's kids were having a cannonball contest in the community pool. It was loud, chaotic, and wonderful. Every splash was a sound of safety. Every shout was a testament to a functional community. Carol had tried to weaponize the rules. She saw them as a club to beat people into submission, a way to manufacture her own petty power. She was so obsessed with the letter of the law that she had forgotten its purpose. I lived by the rules too, but I understood that rules aren't meant to be a weapon. They're meant to be a shield. They're there to protect you, to keep the wall from falling on a child, to keep the pool from drowning one. She had reported me for unsafe construction, without realizing that I am the man who defines safety in this city. She brought a beige envelope to a war of blueprints, and she lost. I took a long drink of my beer, leaned back in my chair and closed my eyes, feeling the sun on my face. The deck was solid beneath me. The neighborhood was safe around me. And for the first time in a long time, everything was perfectly and completely up to code.